Hello and welcome to a very special episode of CarlRyds Plays Prison Architect. In this episode we're going to be doing some executions. But first, we're going to see what we did last episode, which is we created the brand new canteen. I finished it off between episodes. Got a new power plant up here because we were running out of power. And that power plant basically just does that entire kitchen and canteen because of all the cookers that are needed. So as you can see there, we now have 3 lots of wiring. So I've done a nice design with the tables and the benches and all the food and everything. And we've also got some guard, dog and armed patrols in there as well to keep law and order, and also some facilities down here as well. So that's what we did in the last episode. We also created our new storage room and extended our cleaning cupboard into the old storage room. So now we've got a big cleaning cupboard. So we've got loads of jobs in there for prisoners to clean the prison as well. But let's get to it. Execution. Now, some of our death row inmates, we had 10 altogether. 1 or 2 of them got killed by armed guards because they wouldn't stop kicking off. One of them was legendary. And some of them were granted clemency. So they were moved to maximum security prisoners, as we can see here. They were moved to that, and 3 of them have been through all their appeals, and it has been decided that they have committed the crime and they should be put to death. As you can see, the state approved conviction strength is 5%. Ours is below that at 1%. So even if James Wallace is innocent, we won't get punished for it because we've followed the process that we're meant to. So, let's get to it. Our first one. Schedule execution of James Wallace, a man convicted for murder, for multiple murders and multiple tortures that he's pled guilty to, and armed robbery as well. So he's a very strong prisoner. He's recently been destructive, attacked staff, and had drugs found on him. He failed all 5 of his death row appeals, and that's why he's at 1%. Let's schedule his execution. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is initiate a prison-wide lockdown. Our guards are now going to lock everyone else in the cells. Okay. Our prison-wide lockdown has been completed by our guards. The next thing is to test the facility to ensure that everything is working. The electrical supply to the chair is tested. And the final route of the prisoner is planned out. That's being tested right now. And has been completed. Assemble the execution detail. A warden and the chief make their way to the condemned inmate's cell. A priest or spiritual leader of the prisoner's choice arrives on site and visits the prisoner in his cell to say his final prayers. Here comes his spiritual leader. And we can also bring in the witnesses to the facility as well. So these are probably people from his family and the victim's family who are being brought in to the prison, as well as our execution detail as well. Everyone is now making their way in. His spiritual leader, the warden, and the chief are all making their way to his cell, and the witnesses are making their way to the execution room. Wallace's wife, Wallace's father, Wallace's victim's family. Wallace's victim's family. There in his cell. Escort prisoner to facility. The condemned inmate is escorted from his cell to the execution facility. The warden, chief, and priest accompany him. The guards will open the door, and he will be escorted to the execution room. As you can see, other inmates are kicking off with our guards because they're locked down, but this is important. Wallace is ready. With everyone in place and all procedures followed, the final authorization for the execution is given by me. And it's done. Dismiss all staff and witnesses. Everyone leaves. And we can see the final report. The mandatory execution of James Wallace was carried out at 18:45 as scheduled by electric chair, in the presence of witnesses. The standard compensation of $10,000 is awarded to the institution for their part in this process. There we go. Now our guards are going to get our prison back into shape, because there's a lot of prisoners that have complaints that they've been locked down recently, so our guards are just going to sort out everyone who's currently unhappy, and then we can get on with our next execution. Okay, our next execution is Adam Boyles, convicted of murder, grievous bodily harm and torture, and aggravated assault. He too has failed all 4 of his death row appeals and has been responsible for recent misconduct. His likelihood of clemency is 2%, below the state-approved conviction strength. Let's schedule his execution. Execution initiated. And now we can test the facility and bring in our detail and our witnesses. Everyone is now on their way. His spiritual leader, the chief, and the warden are making their way to his cell, and our witnesses are making their way to the execution room. Again, a mixture of his victim's family, and I don't think there's any of his family. It's just his victim's family this time. And of course, the priest. Escort prisoner to the facility. I will now give the authorization for the execution to take place. Dismiss staff and witnesses. And see the final report. The mandatory execution of Adam Boyles was carried out at 3:15 as scheduled by electric chair in the presence of witnesses. The standard compensation of $10,000 is awarded to the institution for their part in this process. Our last one is Dalton Thomas, a man convicted of multiple murders and attempted murders. He too has failed 5 death row appeals and will now be sentenced to death. We'll initiate the prison-wide lockdown and test the facility. We'll bring in our execution detail and our witnesses. The warden, the chief, and his spiritual leader are making their way to his cell, and the witnesses have made their way to the execution room. Everyone is in place. We're going to escort the prisoner to the facility. Everyone is now in place for the execution to take place. I will give the authorization. We'll clear the staff and witnesses. And see the final report. The mandatory execution of Dalton Thomas was carried out at 7:21 a.m. as scheduled by electric chair in the presence of witnesses. The standard compensation of $10,000 is awarded to the institution for their part in this process. If these executions were done wrong, so if it turned out that this prisoner was innocent, it would have told us in this report that he was innocent. But in the 3 cases we had here, all 3 of them were guilty of their crimes and were put to death by electric chair. This has been a very special episode of CarlRyds Plays Prison Architect. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.